Cook, and we're joined now by the writer and journalist Douglas Murray, and from Manchester by Asim Qureshi, the research director at CAGE, an advocacy group which works on behalf of those imprisoned as part of the war on terror. Thank you both very much for joining us. And Douglas Murray, do you think the act of swearing allegiance to ISIS, is treason?
Well, there are a number of problems, aren't there? I mean, not least, as it was mentioned in your package, the fact that Islamic State calls itself an Islamic State, but it's not recognised as a state, and there's a problem of legitimising it if we decide that it is indeed a state. However, I think this debate comes at a very useful time. There has been a problem for some years now, which you can feel successive governments, and indeed different governments across the West struggling with, which is what you do about this form of subversion, treason. It's something like that. Now, I would suggest that the legislation that is obviously obsolete needs to be looked at, because there is definitely a problem of a type of ideology, a radical Islamist ideology, in which people do have effectively an allegiance to something that is not their country. And what do we do with those people? What ought we to do with them? That is a serious question which needs looking at.
And why should it be treason? Let me go to Asim Qureshi. Surely you can see that any jihadists who swear allegiance to ISIS, whatever that body is, must be committing treason by the nature of it, aren't they?
Look, I think these things are extremely complicated, and using broad brush terms and rhetoric around who these people are and what they believe in, I think is actually quite disingenuous.
Well, no, it's not disingenuous, because that's what the Foreign Secretary is talking about. He's talking about re-establishing this age-old, antiquated law to fill a gap that there is at the moment.
No, I don't think there is a gap. I mean, look, we have some of the most disproportionate legislation, across the whole of Europe in terms of how we deal with the threats that there are to the UK. In fact, rather than saying we need more laws or to reinvent old laws, we actually need to go back to the old criminal justice system, the way that we used to do things, which was based on evidence. Now, if people are committing war crimes, then yes, crimes should be held accountable. But the very idea that somehow anybody who goes over to Syria or Iraq should automatically be assumed to be joining up with ISIS, and that somehow that they've kind of betrayed the UK. I don't think that necessarily marries up.
Not automatically. I don't think anyone thinks that it should happen automatically.
Well,
but just very quickly, it's certainly not true to say that we have the most stringent or the most draconian or anything else laws.
But do we need treason as an extra law when we can cover it by looking at war crimes or murder?
Well,
why would you glorify
first of all, war crimes
like
is difficult. There's a particular issue in this country at the moment which you can feel politicians dancing around. Look at the one mentioned in your package about membership of prescribed organisations. My think tank's looked at this. We've had 3 occasions on which this legislation, which was brought in the 2000 Act, reinforced in the 2006 Act, it's only been used 3 times. It's a very weak piece of legislation, actually, which has a very small prison sentence associated with it. The problem is, and we saw it again the other week with the Theresa May, the Home Secretary's speech at the Conservative Party conference, where she was talking about, for instance, banning orders on people being allowed to speak in public. Now, a lot of us think that those are very illiberal and quite wrong measures to bring in. But there are already sort of sounds like that coming from politicians, because really what they're trying to grapple with is not the people who are actually, as it were, have actually killed somebody on the streets of Britain. It is what people are doing where they are trying to subvert and are actually willing to fight against this country.
I mean, there you have it, Asim Qureshi. These guys are going overseas, they are signing up to ISIS, they are burning their passports. What's wrong with this country turning round and saying, yes, that's treachery, you're not wanted here anymore, and that's the law that we will put on top of this crime?
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that how does that help stop that flow from happening in the first place anyway? Look, the reality is the message that's been sent out by the UK government for the last 13 years of this war on terror is that we can do a whole range of things to you. We can imprison you in your own home.
Or maybe
we can take your passports away.
Maybe that we don't do enough.
Let me just finish, okay? Like, we can take your passports away. We can take your citizenship away. This is the message that keeps on coming up over and over again by successive Home Secretaries.
Qureshi's point is it hasn't worked for 13 years.
But no, that's palpably nonsense. palpably nonsense. At least one very major plot has been prevented most years by the police and security service in this country. We have seen many, many arrests, dozens and dozens of prosecutions in recent years of people found guilty in the British courts of crimes.
Of crimes?
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly,
So
and
why
that's the
then
point.
do you need
Then
to...
why
use-
do you need to use all of these tools and convince people that they don't...
I raise the point because Asim Qureshi very disingenuously tries to pretend that, as it were, he's against the particular law we're talking about tonight. He's not. He's against the previous laws that have successfully prosecuted people in this country.
Asim, we've run out of time. Let me give you the last word on this then. This is about trying to prevent a worse state of affairs than we are currently in.
And it's the counter-terrorism legislation that's resulted in that domestic policy in the UK is alienating and disenfranchising young Muslim men, which is the reason why they find comfort in the fact that they belong somewhere. If we make them feel like they belong here,
chopping off people's heads in Syria.
that's nonsense. Because the thing is that if you speak to any of the people who are disenfranchised on the streets of London, they say the same thing, which is about counter-terrorism policy and the way that impacts.
Was a gentleman there who was debating Douglas Murray. I think his whole essence was that there are already some laws on the books for treason, for basically in terms of if people decide that they want to go abroad and fight for someone else other than the United Kingdom, that there are laws already on the books that if they do something, that if they go out there and commit war crimes or those kind of things, then there's something that the United Kingdom can do with them in terms of invalidation of citizenship, take away their passports, imprisonment or jail, depending upon that you go through a trial by jury, make sure that there's evidentiary requirements that show that the person did commit some acts of war criminality. And so Douglas Murray, basically, I think he was countering with the fact is that in a society that the laws that are on the books are pretty weak. And the lady who's a moderator, what she's basically trying to say is that should we need laws that are strengthened, that specifically say that if you commit these acts, they would be considered treasonous. And why not put them into play? There's something to be saying that if someone says, I want to fight for another country. I want to fight for, a radicalist fundamentalist group. I want to fight against, name your country, but we're talking about the UK. I want to fight against Britain. So suppose somebody mouths that. They say that. That's one of those things where you've got to decide, where does your freedom of speech allow you to speak till it becomes to the point where you decide to say, you can't say things like that. Now, I personally think, I don't know, somebody saying that I want to fight for somebody, if you're actually going to go ahead and do it, that's a whole different thing. But just to say that, I don't know if that's enough to put into a language or into a law that says, you'll be imprisoned for saying you want to go fight. That'd be like saying, I want to go fight for communism. I want to go fight for socialism. I want to go fight for terrorism. I want to fight. I want to do my best. I want to do my part. But you physically take that into an actual action and you decide to leave the country and go abroad and fight with a terrorist organization that that everybody knows full well that if they could, they would wreak havoc and terrorist acts on your home country. I think you have given up your citizenship. You've given up, your residency. You've given up the privilege of being able to call the country that you left from home, because they're not. You've left them. And once you leave, I don't think you should ever be able to be allowed to come back. And maybe you have to do that on a case-by-case basis. If that was me, I'd put it in the fact that you want to come back and the law is made that way, then my thing is complete banishment. You decide to fight for a terrorist organization and go abroad and fight for a group like ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever, you're done. You want to come back to Britain? I would say, sorry, you're not allowed. Now, they might decide to say you have to hear it on a case-by-case basis. Okay, case-by-case basis, adjudicated, give them a jury trial, put the facts before the court. Why would you want to come back? Why? What would you be doing? Because the entity that you were fighting with, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Majroon, whatever those offshoot fundamentalist Islamist groups are, terrorist groups, and it doesn't have to be, it could be a cultural, it could be a eco-terrorist group. It's a group that's committed to doing terrorist acts against, oil, gasoline, coal, nuclear plants, against, corporations, those kind of things. And you go abroad to help them. Remember Greenpeace? Nothing really peaceful about Greenpeace. But you do something like that and you participate in eco-terrorism? Sorry. You're not coming back to the country so you can continue to commit those acts. Because you were doing them over there. Who's to say you don't want to start doing them in the country when you come back home? That's just my take. That's the way I feel. And we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. And if you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel if we've earned it. Like, share, and follow us. Take a look. Give us your comments down below. We'd love to hear from you, for or against. Take a look at our other videos here and below. I'll leave with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.